work. Just as a side note, like this book, it looks like a literature review over like many fields. So like you can find like it contains about 75 pages of reference. So it's like a thorough like research over like different fields, and we will see. So firstly, why am I giving this talk? When I read that book, which was actually recommended to me in the Women Tech Maker Summit at Google, which Tubul supported my trip. So like one of the panelists suggested that book. And when I read that, like I noticed why she was trying to recommend it to everyone, because when you start reading that book, you just want more and more people to just read that book and think about it. So we will, and the other thing was like, as I was like talking to more and more people and reading that book, I noticed there are so many great things that we have as at Tubals. So I wanted time to thank like my teammates and everyone that I work with, and like see what are the good things that we can keep up doing. And because that book is mostly of a research in different areas, so she doesn't suggest like solution for each field. And I think one of the reasons is like, as she's a journalist, so she wanted herself to put it in a situation to suggest solution, and would be criticized by like, why you're giving solution for the area that you're not like in. So like there, one of the areas she talks about is the technology. So as a technology company, maybe we can think about like what are the things that we can do. And also because it talks about day-to-day life, so we can see like as each individual, what are the things that we can do. Oops, I talk about the why, as you see. So some overview. So one of the great things that I liked about that book was one of the things that she says is like, so in her book, she talks about like how decisions that have been made from city planning, public transport, medical research to like designing smartphones might have made life harder for women. But she says that it's not like men were like, yeah, let's make life harder for women. It wasn't a deliberate act. So it was a like subconscious thing, and it was because of some sort of not thinking. Because throughout the history for many, many thousands of years, it was like default as like thinking, like men were mostly in the decision making process, and they were considered as the default. So the error of thinking as half the population can work for designing something that you want to work for 100% of the population, that's one of the problems. So what I liked about was like and the good thing about that book is she doesn't, it really makes you angry and really depressed, which is a good thing for taking actions, but it doesn't make you angry at a person or as at a like even at men, women. It just makes you angry at different fields of science and like the processes that are like decisions are being made. So we will see like shortly that like few examples. So at, if by end of the talk I would like pursue you not, or like make you interested enough in that book to like read it yourself or listen to it yourself, my job would be done. And the main thing is that it talks about not necessarily women are not considered in decision making, is because there isn't much of data gathered. So we're not gathering enough data for women, or like even when we are gathering data that are for men and female, men and women, we just don't think about and analyze them based on sex. So like we just say, yeah, all the population, that was the data. Or, but if we sometimes just create separate charts and separate analysis based on male and female, we might get to different results and different conclusions. And the other thing is like she wants so to show that how having women in the rooms that decisions are being made, and like her voices, their voices being heard, will lead to better decisions. So that's why she wants to encourage more and more people to listen to women, and also for women to just pursue different fields that like will lead to decision making. So let's hear some facts. I listened to the audiobook. The audiobook was about, I think, 6 or 8 hours. So I tried really hard to not to make my talk 8 hours. So it's going to be just 20 minutes. And I might forgot some numbers. Hopefully I will read some of them right. So let's start with anthropology, studying of human beings. So there was a symposium held at 1966, which talks about men as hunter. It was for years, and it was a like, so that talks about like how men like were like hunting and like finding food for the families and all these things. But it was until 1975 that another researcher, Sully Scholem, found that, like, asked the question, okay, we talk about men were hunting, but what about the other half of the population? What were women doing all the time that men were hunting? And then she put like the research about, okay, women were gathering, we were caring, taking care of children, and all of them need collaboration as well. And the other one that it's a little bit interesting is there was a bone found because, and everybody thought that, okay, it's a like warrior because if she or he was buried with bone, with horses and weapons. And we all think that, okay, it's a bone, so like nobody can think like, no, so it's an objective thing. So like if it's either male or it is female and it's obvious, so like you can make decision based on that. But for although that bone has like something that would look like pelvic, but everybody for over 20 years thought that, okay, it's a warrior, therefore it's a male. But after a test, a DNA test at 2017, it shows no, it's the female. And then the thinking was shift. So people were asking, okay, maybe she wasn't a warrior then. Like maybe she was just buried as a ceremony over there because she was buried with horses and weapons. But nobody usually asks these questions when they find the male bone with weapons and like horses. The other area that is like, so all of them are saying that like, okay, we might not also have data and also default thinking of, okay, something might be a male. One of the other area is language. So like some language are like, few languages are gender neutral. English is one of the good ones that like, so you have, although you have she and he and all these things, but at least the words are not like feminine or masculine. One of the examples that is a little success is emojis. So like emoji is the language nowadays, it's the language of like, yeah, digital world. And it's more like vastly using by men and women. But until 2016, all the emojis were like male. And there was like, okay, we have a runner and we have a like, we have a runner that is like, look like a male, but although it was just a Unicode. So it was the digital digital like companies that decided, okay, this is a Unicode that says runner, let's represent it as male. And it was after, I think it was after 2016 that Unicode decided to explicitly have representative and different codes for like male runner, female runner. It is a success. It's a little one, but it's good that like we have specifically female and male, like from firefighters to teachers to like doctors and everything. Also to the worlds of movies. So like researchers researchers shows that most of the time it's the male character that it's the lead, and that's why like most of the time female like even talk less in the movies. And even when the female are the lead characters, that's the time when male and female talk equally, even when you expect, okay, that's the time that female is the lead, so it should be the other way around. Also in textbooks, like the even the pictures with the name, they're mostly male. And even in the high school textbooks, like there are so many times, even throughout in the history books, only 10% of each page might talk about females, which will affect all the students that are reading those. If we go back to more depressing facts, car crash testing. So women are 70% more like to like 47% more likely to get severely injured in car accidents, 71% more likely to mediocre injured, like whatever, and like I think 70% more likely to die. So women are more likely to get injured. But when you go to look at the dummy body that is used for car crash testing, it is a 1.77 centimeter and 76 kilogram male. So female are getting more injured, but in the test, they're not even represented. So I think it was until 2060 or 2070 that it became mandatory that the car crash testing have a female dummy test, but they're now, even now, they're mostly tested as the passengers seats, but not the driver seats. And also it, not to say about pregnant women, because like even we don't have like data for so many of the seat belts will not work for a pregnant woman. And even sometimes when they do the test for dummy data in the passenger seat that are female, they're just scaled down male, so not necessarily female bodies. Yeah, I will breathe a little bit. Then we go to the technology, which is our area, so I will talk about it more. In the smartphones, like everybody nowadays, as we know, like all the smartphone companies are obsessed with like bigger sizes smartphone, which doesn't fit females' hand very well. So like for single-handed using them, it's not very easy. Not to say that female don't have much of a pocket or anything that will fit that one into their hands. So we're designing something that will not work very well on them. And there is some research on like how heavy or like big size smartphones will affect arms. And even in those researches, there are not many of the women represented there, which some of them shows that it will affect women's arm because of the different biology more. If we go to the voice recognition, one of the research shown at the Google voice recognition at 2016 shows that it detects male voice 70% more accurate. So let's say if you're in a car and like you want to like say go to right, chances of like even there was a example that a female was saying that it listens to my husband's voice much better and it like works for that much better than that. Also, like, as we say, we're training all the artificial intelligence algorithms on the data. But what if that data is biased as well? What if that data is not representing women very well? Let's say, like Google, if you look at the Google search images, for example, 27% of US CEOs are women, but like only 11% of Google images are for CEO, you will see women. Also, nowadays, they're saying that like only almost 72% of the CVs in the US doesn't get to the human eye. So it's like by trainings in the algorithm. So they look at the facial recognition, they go through the CV, all the facial expression. But what if all the algorithms that has been trained, mostly trained on male data? So, and we know that the facial expression, body language, all these things would be different. So the social factors for like expression for female men and women might be different. So we might get to a world that all the AI trainings have been done on the male data. So therefore they will again choose more and more men to go to the works as well. There are more data on that area. I will get to that. So we also have like, even it gets worse when we see that AI is being used in like cancer recognition, all these things, but we have to make sure that all of them will have both data from men and female, so that because if we don't train the algorithms that are going to be used in decision making and making them biased, it's not going to be a good for us. And as is shown, like when the data is biased, the algorithm amplifies that bias. So for example, if it's like 11%, it'll get to like 50% biased at the end when the algorithm is trained. So as a like a technology company, we can make sure at least like there are like more work around these to make sure that more the data set are more the data set are like equal, and like make sure that like we have both male and female representative. But one of the things was they were looking at the 520 million word data set, and the pronoun for male to female was 2 to 1. So the algorithm was trained with all the words, all the news, all the like media, all the things, that the pronoun was 2 to 1. So we cannot accept that algorithm to not think that the world is dominated by men. So we have to make sure not only the data that is like being like as an input to them. So if we don't good right input to them, we cannot accept like right and equal output from them. If we go to public transport, we will see that like, especially for buses, women are the people that use buses and public transport more often, because like men usually drive. And because women do the care activities, so they drop the schools at the kid, they like put their like old parent to the doctor, so they do short trip like transports. But most of the time, and they do that like outside the peak hour mostly, But most of the public transport is designed for the peak hours, and it's not designed for like short trips, short like separated trips. And like one of the examples that like help women to get more public transport was like just by simply putting more lights at the bus stops, it will like make women more feel more safe using public transport, and like because if they wanted to get home later. If we see as a little example, like even in toilet lights, sometimes we think equality means like means being fair. So there was a time that there were in one of the malls that I don't remember the name, they decided to make the bathrooms, whole one of them be half of the bathrooms being like rooms and half of them being cubics. And what it ended up being was like less helpful for women, because most of the men were preferring the other bathrooms as well. So therefore it was shared again between them. And one of the notes was like, you will notice that the bathroom lines for the women is mostly longer. One of the reason being is they are the people who take the kids and the elderly to the bathroom with them, so they will need longer times. And also women need to go to bathroom more often, so not all the time having equal, even having equal number of bathrooms will be working. Not to say that there are even so many like underdeveloped countries that they might not even have bathroom for like close to house, so women having like going to bathroom at the end of the night, they find it really scary and having bad consequences for them. So they would end up like not drinking enough water, to not having to go to bathroom at night, which will again have consequences for them as well. The most depressing section was medical research, because you would see that how often the drugs that are claimed to be working and being for all the human being most of the time are not including women in the research, because women have like complicated hormones, and so many of the times even when they're included in the research, they're included in the first phase of their cycle, which is more similar to men. So one of the drug tests was like one of the one that I don't remember the exact numbers, was for um, medical device for heart. So like that would help like heart rates. And because they were just testing it on the men, they decided that this product doesn't work, and it's not because like the rhythm that it needs to be like active, the men rhythm wasn't that high, so it wasn't like they thought, no, it's not going to work. But they later found out that the rate that doesn't get that product activated is the exact rate that female heart works on. So if they have tested that product for female, they would see, yeah, that product will work, and that would have gone to market. There's so many times that like if you go to doctor for some female related issues, there might not even be research or products, let's say PMS. So like she was talking about like one of the research that tries 2 or 3 times to convince the people that would give her grant that, okay, I found something that might work, but she couldn't get enough like funding to pursue the research. And the other one is like even for delivering baby, there are like number of like problems that might happen, so many deaths. And again, it has shown that even for in the US for Black females, the rate is higher, but even they couldn't find grants to like do something that will prevent that. So instead of like after, so yeah, it's like the problem is very severe, try to find it before that one. One of the other one that was really shocking was one of the researcher in 2016 found out that they tested on mice, and they found even for preventing heart attack, the time of day really matters. So if you have a heart attack at day, your chance of survival is higher, because the immune like system at that point is higher. And it was a breakthrough, and everybody was happy about that one. But it finds out, another research at that day find the exact opposite result, that if you have a heart attack during the day, your chance of survival is less. And when they find out what was the reason, was the first one was tested only on male mice, and the second was what only tested on female mice. So if you have a research on one field, it might get to 2 different results, because nowadays they're showing that male and female body might be different even at the cell level. And that's not something that in the like psychology and in the like medical schools the students are taught. So most of the time they read anatomy and female anatomy, they read biology and female biology, except like it's something separate, and like few courses are like dedicated to this one, and some of them are not even mandatory. Going to post-disaster plans, it's like, okay, what if we have a disaster, things going wrong? Again, sadly, women die mostly after because of the disaster. Let's say tsunami, because in the in many countries, women are less likely to learn swimming, less likely to learn climbing, and not say in some of the culture, like women not necessarily go out without like having their men. So sometimes they wait inside the house for the male to survive them, and sadly they die. And some of the other things that happens is like, if you look at some refugee camps, we will see that, okay, there's most of the time, or refugee camps or like homeless shelters, they're most of the time mixed sex. So like they found that in one of the refugee camps, because like it was mixed sex and the female wearing hijabs, they were not comfortable to take off their scarf. So they were end up having some rashes and all these things. And also like again in the homeless shelters, female trying, they feel less safe going to those places, because like they feel less safe because it's mixed. So it sometimes means that even gender neutral may not necessarily mean gender equal. There was an example that like after a disaster that happened, they tried to build like shelter houses for the people, but they didn't add kitchen to the shelter houses. So again, women for cooking, they had to go out, or to find a way to do cooking, even it's mostly what they do at homes for those women. And again, that happens in another shelter homes, that it was excluded because maybe like the people who were planning were mostly men, and they were thinking, okay, maybe it's not necessary. So there are tons and tons of more facts in the book, in more and more different area, in politics, in even like in day-to-day life. One of the examples that I find it really funny was the workplace temperature was most of the time that they find the safe workplace temperature, it was for men. So like women really feel colder at some point, but thankfully we have different channels for coldness and all these things. It also like shows like how different workplaces, for example, the one that are nailing salons, are the one that work with like chemicals. They might be even dangerous, and they might lead to like some cancers. Another sad one was like the bulletproof vests that were for like polices. They were not designed at the first for female bodies, so like female policers might find it like uncomfortable for them, and there was sometimes that like they would just take it off because they couldn't like act really quickly, and they would get more severely in jail because something that was supposed to protect their body was not designed for their body as well. So I hope that by now, like that book is so depressing. So like but I want to recommend it to everyone, because like being depressed and being angry is a way that we can take actions. And the other one was that I I wanted to find a way to thank each and everyone, especially the people that I worked with day to day, thankfully, because this book doesn't specifically talk about like that much detail, but when I talk to more people, and when I was at that conference that they were talking about like their experiences, I was like, there are so many things that we are thankful of. So one of them was we have really great and supportive team members. Actually, Pascal was the person that encouraged me to give this talk. I was talking to him and was like, why not give a brown bag? One of the things that I notice really often, and the people that I'm going to say them is because I work with them more often, Gavin, Pascal, Jared, Bart. There are so many times that in the meeting rooms, we're in the meetings, and I see that they might not even do that deliberately. Is when I say something, they say it back and they say, yeah, she said that. So it is because even in that book, it talks about when women are less in the meetings, they are more being interrupted. So it is a really good thing that not only we're not interrupted, but also when we say something, it is emphasized on, or I found that so many times that yeah, you give that's my experience. I don't know if somebody else had that, but I'm sure they had that. You sometimes something, but you wait for us to say that, which is really nice. a great thing that we have is like our flexible working hour is not just a term for like attracting more people, and it's a really flexible working hour. As I was talking to like Elang and Talisha, they mentioned that like that how much it helped them, like especially after having baby, and we can all see like how flexible working hours we have. As I was looking at our job advertisement, it's been years that we're not using the term he in our job advertisement. Not only he and she, we are using you, which is really awesome. And one of the great things that I found out is like they find when by just removing the 5 years experience, they will see more women like applying for the jobs, because that's one of the things that will scare them. And when I was looking at our job advertisement, we have nothing about years of experience, which is great. Thank you so much. And we also build so many games for STEM. So like, and not only we build games for STEM, like we've been like sponsoring the many clubs that are like for women in tech. And we are like, we have so many great people from men to women that we work with. And it's a really great thing to be thankful of. So I just want, because that book, as I said, doesn't like offer solutions, each of us might be like, each of us are expert in different fields, even as I said, day-to-day life. So if we just read that book and think about what are the things that we can do, or like if we find great things that we have and suggest it to other people, and just even keeping the good work, that would be great. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much. If there is any questions, which I hope not be. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So like, oh yeah, I forgot about that one. So one of them was like, so after the industrial revolution, they were like, okay, let's keep industry separate and have home as a place for like resting and leisure. But nowadays, as like more men and women are working, like Melbourne is a good example of that. So we have a city, and then like most of the houses are around the city. So we've spent so many times going to city for work. And when we got back home, there is still work as well. So because at that point, when the people who were planning those were like mostly, let's say, men, and at that time it wasn't very common for them to work at home. For them, it was home as a place for resting, versus for women at that time, women were working at home most of the time, and like their work is not being captured. By now, even for men that are like going to work and trying to like help their families at home, they might find it like even frustrating as well. Like there is like home is not necessarily always the leisure place and like resting place all the time. That's one of them that I remember. Yeah. It was, I think it was a, they thought she or he is a Vatican, Vatican, yeah, it was somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. It says, yeah, Viking skeleton known as the Brika warrior. I think it doesn't mention where exactly it was. Also, I'm looking at the notes and I remember something else. It also looks at like the paintings in the cave. So most of the time they thought, okay, it's the male paintings, but now more and more analysis suggests that even the paintings in the cave might, like many of them being done by women, which was like ignored so many times. Yeah. Happy world. Yeah. No more questions. Thanks, really. Thanks everyone for listening to the